if you are interested in getting into single speeding, one of the things that you need is a sliding drop. You need a way that you can push that rear tire back to get that chain tension right. But if you have a bike that does not have sliding drops, there are two ways that you can get around that. And one is what Steve did, which is he got a chain tensioner. And so that basically, it looks like the bottom half of a derailleur, and that allows you to basically run a chain, and then you have this tensioner that comes down and pushes down on the chain. So you don't need the sliding drop. The other thing that you could do is you can run an eccentric bottom bracket. And I don't know enough about bottom brackets to say that this will work on every single bike. However, I do know that I ran an eccentric bottom bracket on a few of my bikes. Before I got the Carver, I had a Niner and I had something else. And those bikes weren't single speed specific, so I used an eccentric bottom bracket. What that does is it takes your crank and it kind of moves it up in an ovicular way. I just made up a word, ovicular. But it sounds really good. It sounds like it could be a word. So picture it like a circle, but then the crank is actually offset. And so you can rotate the whole crank and the circle. I'll put if you're watching this on YouTube, I'll put a picture of it.
I hated those things, man. I hated adjusting that thing.
Yes, they are. Yeah, they're very finicky.
Do they still do that? Do they still make them?
Yeah, you can still get eccentric bottom brackets. Yeah, absolutely.
I love the word, the name, eccentric. Oh, yeah. That's my eccentric, like your eccentric aunt, oh, that's my eccentric bottom bracket. It's very finicky.
Yeah.
Eccentric.
Yeah. So those are my two, well, it's really one tip, but it's two ways to make a single speed out of a bike that was not single speedable.
Go on Facebook yard sale and look at someone selling an old frame or an old single speed for that matter. They can last forever. You could fatigue the frame because you do put a lot of pressure on certain parts of the frame. So those frames can maybe break or flex a little bit, but maybe we should talk about the gearing that we run. I think I'm running a 32-19. Maybe I went to a 20 because I got tired and I got a little bit older and I wanted to make it up hills. We used to run 18. We ran 32-17. I think you were running a 17 for a while. I mean, you were a beast. So it's 32 and teeth in the front, and then we're talking about the back. Usually 32 is kind of the standard front chain ring for most bikes. And then so if you want to change the gearing, you would put a smaller gear or a bigger gear in the back, and then you got to get the chain tight again. So that's where Sage is talking about either the eccentric bottom bracket or some sort of sliding dropout where you can essentially move that gear back or forward a little bit depending on the size of the gear that you're running. So it really comes in handy when you're changing gears, or you stretch out your chain and then you put a new chain in and you want it to be tight. That's another thing, is that you can kind of wear these gears out. Yeah.
You brought up a really good point. If you're looking to start out, I think a good gear would be like 32 in the front, 21 or 20 in the back, because the cogs are really inexpensive. I think you can get a single speed cog. Yeah. So you could buy a cog for probably like $20, $30. I haven't looked at the prices, but they're going to be reasonable. And so, and then chains, you're just taking out links at that point if you're going to a smaller cog. So start out bigger, see how that feels. If you're in a very hilly environment, then you definitely want to lean toward like a bigger cog in the back, 21 or 20. Then as you get more proficient, start dropping that. I started on a 20, went to a 19, 18, and I even think I got down to a 17 on the belt. But I'm back up to a 19 because I don't single speed that much anymore. And so I lost that single speed power. And so now when I get out of my single speed, I don't want to hurt myself, so I chose a 19, and the 19 works well for me right now.
Yeah, it's more fun if you can get up the hill, like if it's possible. You don't want to be constantly stalling out. You're going to stall out if you're on a single speed. You're going to have moments where you just can't get the pedals around. You're not heavy enough. You don't have enough muscle. Yeah, you just don't have it. But you want that to happen obviously as little as possible. And then at the same time, on the downhill, you want to be able to crank it. On the flats, you want to be able to crank it. So if you go too easy, then you're spinning too fast. So it's a balance, and it kind of comes and goes with your fitness. So. Really good point that we probably should have made earlier on the gear that you chose. We also both kind of referenced our belt drives and the belt drive experiment. So just kind of briefly, I'll tell my belt drive experiment and then you can tell yours. Neither of us stuck with the belt drive.